Welcome to the series, The Search for Inner Peace by Dr. Gerald Mann. Dr. Mann is the senior pastor at the Riverbend Church in Austin, Texas. Let's join Dr. Mann for more of The Search for Inner Peace.
I've been doing a series of sermons called The Things That Make for Peace. We're supposed to have inner peace if we're believers. And I confessed at the very beginning that this is not a series of messages from somebody who's achieved that. This is a series of confessions from somebody who is not. But I'm trying to gain on it. And today I want to talk about the power of laughter. One verse from James, first chapter, verse 2. Spoken to a bunch of people who were suffering. Laugh, my friends, when you are beset with life's troubles. It will empower you to discover a faith that endures. The power of laughter. Years ago, I was about 25 years old. I was invited to do a 5-day speaking thing, which we Baptists called a revival meeting, in a little country, open country church. In fact, the nearest thing to a town was a general store that sold everything from feed to soap. And it was at an intersection of two highways. And every day after lunch, all of the men in town would gather, around the Cracker Barrel to drink coffee and to trade stories. And I ended up being there for 5 days. And the owner was a man named Alvin. That's not his name, but we'll call him Alvin. And Alvin was one of those sweet saints that God just creates for communities. Everybody loved him, and everybody was welcome, and they drank his coffee every day. He had a son about my age who was about 6'4", Alvin Jr. They just called him Junior. And Junior was mentally challenged. He had a very low IQ. He was the only child they had because the doctors told them not to have any more. And Alvin could work, Junior could work there at the feed store. And when we were talking every day, he would walk round and round the table. And he would, every time somebody would laugh, he would laugh. And when somebody would frown, he would frown. And he wanted so much to be in on the conversation. And the men had known him for years. They didn't pay much attention to him. And one day, about the third day, we were talking. Somebody mentioned something about a motorcycle. And he just jumped into the conversation and said, "Motorcycle?" He said, "My cousin Jimmy Smith's got a motorcycle. And it will run." He said, "Last Friday when I got off, he drove up there in that Harley Davidson," that's what it is, "and he gave me some goggles and a leather helmet, and I got up on that motorcycle behind Jimmy Smith, and we just took off. And we went so fast, we passed everybody. We went so fast," he said, "the next morning at daylight, we was in Honolulu, Hawaii." Well, everybody just roared, and I roared along with them. And then I thought, gee, that must hurt Alvin Sr. And I went into his office and I said, "Alvin, I have an exceptional child. I apologize for laughing at Junior." He said, "I was laughing harder than anybody else." He said, "Alvin is a savant. He has this rare gift of humor." He said, "We don't even have a cousin named Jimmy Smith." Much less a Harley Davidson. And he said he does this all the time. And he said, "I laugh as hard as anybody else." He said, "My wife and I believe that God gave us Alvin Jr. to remind us every day of the power of laughter." The power of laughter. What a shame that we've separated religious devotion from laughter. I grew up in a tradition where it was a sin to laugh. I mean, if they caught you laughing, they figured there must be something evil going on. We have all these sad sacks running around. The truth is, there are no sad saints. Jesus surrounded himself with laughter. There are no sad saints. What a shame that we've equated humorlessness with devotion to God. Humor, let me say parenthetically, can be negative. It can be destructive. Humor that is used to put somebody else down. Humor that is used as escapism. Psychiatrists tell me all the time about counseling with people. I've counseled with them myself, who, when it comes down to dealing with serious issues, will crack a joke as an escapist mechanism. there are negative forms of laughter, to make jokes at other people's expense. But healthy humor, which I define as the humor we use to face life's troubles, is what James was talking about in that text. Laugh when all kinds of troubles come your way. You will discover the power of the faith to endure. So I want to talk about the power of healthy laughter. Let's say 2 or 3 things. First, healthy laughter empowers physical and mental health. Laughter is good for you. About 35 years ago, Norman Cousins, a journalist, had crippling arthritis. He was in constant pain. Doctors sent him home. All he could do was take painkillers. He didn't want to become addicted to the painkillers. So he started trying to experiment with things to help him. He loved the Marx Brothers and Three Stooges. So he watched them for hours. All night long he would watch them, and they never got old to him. He just belly laughed every time he saw them. And he discovered after a period of months that 10 minutes of solid belly laughing gave him 2 hours of pain-free sleep. He told his doctors about it. They began to experiment. They found that when you laugh, really just let it out, that you produce an enzyme that is a natural painkiller. And today it is universally accepted that laughter is good for you. I read a thing in Psychology Today that said they analyzed tears that were shed in laughter, and they analyzed tears that were shed in grief, and the ones shed in laughter produce a chemical that helps your immune system. It's healthy to laugh physically. Mentally, Daniel Goleman has a bestseller out called Emotional Intelligence, and he talks about doing an experiment with college students who are honor students. He puts them in 2 separate groups, and he gives them the same creative problem to solve, but 10 minutes before he gives them the problem, he gives one group of them sad stuff, scenes of the Holocaust, scenes of mayhem and murder, and the other group he gives them jokes. He gives them Robin Williams and a bunch of funny stuff, and the ones who are given the funny stuff solve the problems 20% faster than the ones who are given the sad stuff. Laughter is good for your mind. Laughter is a powerful thing. Proverbs 17:2 says, "A laughing heart is good medicine. A downcast spirit dries up the bones." The Hebrews believed that the bones were the infrastructure, like on a building, drying up the bones. Laughter is good for you. The only time I ever talked to Dr. Norman Vincent Peale, he had just celebrated his 90th birthday. I got his telephone number. I called him. To my utter surprise, he took my call. He says, "Oh, yeah, you're that gray-haired preacher from Austin that takes those calls live on television." Well, I said, "Gee whiz, Norman Vincent Peale is listening to me." He said, "I really like your sense of humor." I said, "Well, what's it like to be 90 years old? What do you do every day?" He said, "Well, every day I make sure that I learn something new. Every day I make sure that I go over all my grudges and get rid of them. And every day I try to find something to laugh at." He said, "Laughter will make you live a long time." Laughter is good for you. Second point. There's nothing like laughter to empower your relational health. Laughter helps people get along better. Abraham Maslow was the first psychiatrist in our century to study healthy people in order to formulate his view of human nature. Freud and Jung and Adler and all of them, they took sick people. They studied animals and sick people and came up with a theory of human nature. But Maslow said, let's study healthy people. And he studied what he calls self-actualizing people, which I won't bore you with, but they're the people who've got it all together and are integrated and live better. And he studied them and he tried to find out what they all had in common. And the one thing they all had in common was a keen sense of humor. And he got to studying their relationships. What made people, self-actualizing people, stay married a long time, enjoy each other, and he even studied them sexually. And he said, great sex over a long period of time has to have a sense of humor. And I quote, this is what he said, great sex between longtime lovers, he said, laughing is as common as panting. So I was wondering why Lois and I have been giggling all these years. Laughter is good for relationships. Judith Wallerstein has a new book out on good marriage, and there are many different models of good marriage. It's a great book because it doesn't try to put everybody in one box. There are different good forms of marriage, but the one thing they all have in common is, guess what? An ongoing sense of humor. Humor is good for relationships. But here's what I really came here to tell you. There's nothing like humor, laughter, to empower spiritual health. I mean, let's be honest. If you look at the world objectively, why laugh? I mean, I can't find anything to laugh about in AIDS and corruption and war and hatred, where Ben Hannah is going. I mean, if you look, think about love. I've been in love with the same woman all my life, since I was 13 years old. Married at 20. Been married to her for 40 years. But we're both facing the fact that one of us very likely is going to have to spend some years by ourselves. We're going to lose the people we love. Why love? It's absurd. You're going to lose it. If you look at life realistically, why laugh? I can only think of two reasons to laugh. One is denial. It's just a good way to deny the awful realities of life. It's better to laugh than to go around crying all the time. The only other reason I can imagine to laugh is because it's a declaration of faith. Laughter is our declaration, our deep confidence that as bad as things are, there is a God underneath it all and behind it all who wins in the end. Eugene O'Neill wrote a play called Lazarus Laughed. Not a very popular play by O'Neill. He had some other ones. It's the story, Lazarus was the guy that Jesus raised from the dead. And he has Lazarus coming out of the tomb, and when they unwrap his head with the burial shroud, he is laughing. And he looks into the eyes of Jesus, and they don't say a word. And all Lazarus says is, yes. And they try to get him to talk, and all he does is laugh. And when they ask him a question, he just laughs and says, yes. They can ask him about the weather. He laughed, yes. Well, pretty soon people gather around him, and they ask that question. What's it like on the other side? What's beyond there, Lazarus? What's beyond there? And he just keeps laughing. And after a while, he finally speaks, and he says, there is only life. What's beyond there? There is only life. There is only the life of God and the laughter of God. I heard the laughter of Jesus in my heart, and it said, you were born out of the laughter of God, and you soon return to the laughter of God. And listen to this, death is only the fear that's in between. And he said, my heart being reborn to life began to laugh the laughter of God. There is no death. Death is dead. There is only life. There is only laughter. There is only the laughter of God. Well, in short order, people began to gather around Lazarus. People of different creed, of different color, people who were formerly enemies, put aside their animosities. He begins to attract many people. And guess what? The religious authorities, the preachers, are threatened. And they come and say, you are neglecting doctrine. You are doing things that are unorthodox. How dare you laugh and celebrate and not be pure? And pretty soon word filters to Rome, to the emperor himself, Tiberius, who is an old man dying, and his young mad son Caligula is about to inherit the throne. And they summons Lazarus and his followers to Rome, and by the time they get there, all of their guards are laughing and celebrating. And finally, Caligula realizes that Lazarus is a threat, and he says, in essence, if you don't stop this infernal laughing, I'm going to kill you. And Lazarus says, you're going to what? There is no death. Death is dead. There is only the laughter of God. And finally, Caligula says, even though you're making me laugh, Lazarus, I must kill you in order to prove there is death. If I don't kill you, listen to this, I can't be Caesar. I can't be Caesar. If there is no death, men will not fear me. There has to be death. And so he orders that Lazarus be burned. Nobody will set the fire. So he gags Lazarus so he can't laugh. And as Lazarus is being consumed in the flames, Caligula looks into his eyes, and the eyes of Lazarus are laughing. And as the gag burns off and he is consumed and his ashes float up, Caligula hears the laughter of Lazarus. And he says, "Oh, Lazarus, forgive me. I forgot. I am only a man. I forgot that death is death and that there is only laughter." I remember that story. It's very dear to me because I'm going to tell you something I've never told from the pulpit, and I've never told anybody but my wife this. I've written it in a book that's coming out. You know the circumstance. I've only heard the audible voice of God one time. In 40 years of my journey as a Christian, I've only heard God's voice one time. I've had definite thoughts, I've had definite feelings, but I've only heard a voice once. It was the day my son was born. He was born early. The doctor said that he would not survive. He was in the ICU. They were trying to get him to breathe, and they said he would die. Lois was still under sedation. I had people all around me, but I wanted to be alone, and I found me a bathroom in the hospital that just had one door and one toilet, and I locked it and got by myself, and I sat the only place there was to sit. And I was so angry with God that I actually began to call him names and to curse him. I wanted to die. I said, "Take me. Don't take my son. If he dies, God, I want to die." And I began to call God every kind of obscene name that I had ever heard in my life. I exhausted myself screaming at God. And when I had exhausted myself, I sat quietly with my eyes closed and I just sobbed, seething in anger. And way back in the inner recesses of my mind, I heard God's voice. And do you know what he said? He didn't say anything. I heard him laugh. I heard the laughter of God. And I knew from the laughter of God that he was saying, "I am your friend. There is no death. Death is only the fear between being born out of the laughter of God and returning to the laughter of God." So, my word to you this morning is cheer up. And as Forrest Gump would say, that's all I have to say about that.
Thank you for joining us for the series, The Search for Inner Peace. For information on other audio tapes or books by Dr. Gerald Mann, please call 1-800-388-9500 or write to Gerald Mann Ministries, P.O. Box 842-076, Dallas, Texas 75284. You can turn the tape over now for the continuation of this series from Dr. Gerald Mann.